Hello and welcome to FastFulcrum Friday. I'm Evans Mayhew, the founder and renegade professor associated with FastFulcrum and the courses we offer there so that people can remain relevant in the age of automation. Wanted to just start talking about what we go through in some of the courses, specifically in Remain Relevant. That's the kickoff course for FastFulcrum. As I mentioned in the origin story, I was exposed to the concept of Ikigai through a friend of mine. I was describing to him, this was early days when I was designing the courses for FastFulcrum, and I was describing to him, I think, the need for people to understand their true assets and what they have at their disposal starting at square zero. Because if you get laid off, and I've been laid off several times, if you get laid off, then suddenly you're kind of stuck with whatever you have at your disposal at that given moment. If you're lucky enough to have a severance package, you've got a little bit more runway, but sometimes you don't. Maybe you have just a last check that's coming to you, or you've got a couple of weeks, but sometimes you're just stuck with the ground you're standing on. And that forces us, I think, to look at what we have to work with. And I go through the Apollo 13 example in the class. So you have to look at what you have to work with, what's in your pockets, what's in your satchel, what's in your wallet right now. And I think that involves digging deep and looking at our existing skills, our histories, our connections. What do we have that we can leverage to get us out of this situation and perhaps help us to better prepare for similar situations in the future? So I was talking to this friend of mine, and he's in real estate investment, and he was on one of the like chat groups, and they had said someone had said something very similar talking about Ikigai, and so he turned me on to that. Fascinating stuff. I went out, read several books, but many of them were, and they're fantastic, but they're fashioned in a way to encourage people along the personal growth path, which is fantastic, and that's also a byproduct of what we do by leveraging Ikigai in the way that we do within Remain Relevant. But I wanted to kind of weaponize it, to put an edge on it, so that look at it within a particular context of saying you're trying to survive and thrive in the age of automation. How do you now use Ikigai, and how do you consider it? Then, because of my background in global competitive intelligence, I mashed up Ikigai with SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then on to PEST, political, economic, social, and technological. So that this gives a strong grounding in people looking at what they have to work with, then beginning to look at how that applies to the outside world, then further becoming more strategic in the examination and broadening one's perspective so that you can look further down the board. The more apprised you are of what is happening in the world, the further out, the more time you have to react to it. And that time is lessening and lessening as things go by. But one of the things I think we have to remember, it's very, very critical, we have to remember that at the center of Ikigai is you. Here we see that you are at the center of Ikigai. This takes me back to, I have often gone on a personal growth walkabout. I was really hardcore into reading anything and everything I could get my hands on in this subject several years ago. But I still dabble here and there, but it used to be a pretty bad habit. But anyway, I was reading, and I came across the notion in one of the texts I read talking about how you are not your thoughts. And so all too often I think that we get caught up in the chatter in our heads. At least I do. And so I hope it's a shared experience and I'm not embarrassing myself. But it's one of those things where I think we associate ourselves far too closely with our thoughts and with the conditioned thoughts and the habitual thoughts that we have. And I'm not trying to go all self-help on you. I'm trying to draw a parallel here. I started to think of you are the maestro, and then your thoughts are more or less the music that's being generated from the orchestra pit. Whether it's from the musician or from the instrument or from the music that's actually produced, whatever. It's probably a flawed analogy. But anyway, we're going to run with it. Funny story. I was in Vienna back when I was working with Western Union and a competitive intelligence manager there. I was very, very fortunate to be able to travel to Vienna in several seasons, and it was a wonderful place, wonderful. But they had an incredible museum of music there, just so cool, very interactive, tons of information. I'm sure many people are probably familiar with the game Guitar Hero, where you can hook up a fake guitar. It's pretty much just a video game controller shaped like a guitar that hooks up to a console, and you're then prompted to hit notes and play a given rock song. Well, this was kind of like Orchestra Hero. They had within this Museum of Music, they had this. It was a big screen, and then you could pick up the stylus that the conductor, the baton, the elder wand of music. I don't know what it's called, but anyway, you pick it up, and then you are to try to conduct this virtual orchestra pit in producing a given song. And so, given the fact that I don't read music, that was a more interesting challenge. But the musical notes went across, and you're prompted to try to use the baton or whatever to be able to conduct the orchestra. And it was great because I got into it a couple minutes, and then there was a virtual member of the orchestra who turned around and would start screaming at you, 999. A lot of fun. But anyway, the thing I'm trying to point out here is you are the conductor here. You're at the center. So all these other things that we see orbiting around you, those aren't you, right? So just like your thoughts aren't you, all of these things orbiting around you within the Ikigai diagram, they are not you. And so I really enjoy delving into this and looking at these various respective areas, but it's important to remember that this does not define us. So anyway, one of the things that we walk through what you love, value, and respect. It used to, in many Ikigai diagrams, it's just going to talk to you about what you love. And I think we have to expand that to where it's beyond just love, because love has a lot of different connotations. But I think it's, what do we value? What do we respect? And then within that, we can have separate value stacks. We can have a value stack for people. We can have a value stack for given philosophical sentiments. We can have a value stack for objects. So you can divvy it up in many ways, which we do within the course. Then we have passion, we have mission, and we have calling. So I like to think of those as three legs of a similar stool that are able to dovetail each with the other and really prompt us towards informing our value stack. Then we have, of course, our profession. So what do we do to keep us in three hots and a cot, and how can we leverage that toward evolving and remaining relevant? Then we start to look outward. We start to look at what we're good at. So these are specific skills. So this is differentiated from when we get into SWOT, looking at strengths. So we're looking here at skills. What are you good at? And then how can we dovetail that with what you can be paid for? And then, of course, with what the world needs. And then as we begin to work with SWOT, specifically with opportunities and threats, and then on out into the broader political, economic, social, and technological space, then we start to bring that back into what the world needs. What niche needs can we identify? And then look at the other components of Ikigai and then be able to slide into that and fulfill those needs. So this is food for thought. You sit at the center. All these points of consideration within Ikigai, they orbit around you. And again, I'm not trying to sound like Yoda or anything. I'm definitely a little bit more pink than Yoda is. But I think that this is very important to consider as we move forward. I think all too often we over-identify ourselves with who we are, or with what we've done, rather, our titles, with our credentials. And I think that we need to see ourselves as being a little bit more than that. And we need to start thinking of ourselves in a little bit more of a fluid way. We certainly aren't the same person that we were historically. If you go back and you look at the first job that you ever had, what was it? Mine was a janitor. So I've moved on a little bit since then, and I suspect that you have as well. And so we have to remember we've been fluid historically. So it's important to consider how we'll be fluid moving forward. And going forward in the coming Fridays, I'm hoping I love the fricatives of Fast Fulcrum Friday. So I'm hoping that I'll be posting each Friday and walking through the various components of Ikigai and giving you a taste of what we work with in the Fast Fulcrum curriculum. So I hope to see you next week, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.